Brenda Cosola is a corporate affairs advisor for Chevron. Prior to joining Chevron, she led communications and public affairs for many organizations around the globe, including the Department of Defense, U.S. Air Force, Advantage Technical, and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. She has also worked as a combat correspondent and freelance journalist. Brenda attended Youngstown State University in Ohio for her undergraduate degree and Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for business school. Brenda is an Ohio native who currently calls Houston, Texas home. She is intrigued by the art of communication, photography, storytelling, biology, human progress, good food, and even better human connections. She's a world traveler, frog breeder, and third-rate sommelier. When she's not working or spending time with her pet frogs and hermit crabs, she can be found trying and failing miserably at crow pose, reading true crime novels, or walking her miniature dachshunds Poppy and Winston. Brenda is married to a fellow public affairs professional and has 2 grown children, a son who is a human resource professional in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and a daughter who is a junior at New York University in New York City. Please welcome Brenda Cosola.
Hi, I'm Brenda Cosola, and I'm honored to be here and to share our rescue story with you as part of CrabCon 2021.
Hi, I'm her daughter Gianna, and I will be helping with videography and facilitating the Q&A session.
Thank you, Gianna. So January 22nd was a really eventful day for me. Unexpectedly, we welcomed a bunch of strawberry hermit crabs into our family. My husband was traveling for business. He travels a lot locally, and that day he was engaging with some community members in rural Texas. He met a man who was a pet shop owner, and that man mentioned that he was really busy that day because he had accidentally received land hermit crabs instead of marine hermit crabs, which he had purchased for a customer. So he was busy trying to figure out how to care for them, how to set them up, and of course, what he can do with them, if he's going to sell them or return them to the vendor. My husband had shared with him that his wife loves hermit crabs. We had kept hermit crabs for decades. It all started with my children, which I'm sure many of you can relate. You bring home a crab, you don't know how to care for it, and you learn along the way. At that time, we had 2 purple pinchers at home, and we were actually looking to adopt and to add some crabs to our family. So he thought it was a great fit, and he offered to provide some care. The shop owner said, honestly, I don't really have a market for these crabs. My business has been declining since the start of the pandemic, and he asked my husband to take them home. So after a quick text to me to give me a heads up, he was en route with 2 boxes full of hermit crabs. I luckily had a bunch of spare 10-gallon aquariums. I also keep white tree frogs. I'm a frog breeder, and had a bunch of tanks that were empty, so was able to repurpose them to house the crabs temporarily. And so he got home, arrived with 2 large boxes, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that they were strawberries. I didn't know, if we were going to keep all of them, but there were 20 of them. Definitely not prepared for 20, crabs that need very unique and specialized care. So we did our best to set them up. Over a course of the first couple days, we had a few fatalities. One was dead on arrival, and 1 died overnight, and then 2 died what I guess would be transition stress. They had gone on a long journey, and once they got to us, they had changed hands a couple of times. So, we did the best we could, fed them, gave them access to saltwater and freshwater pools, and they were doing well. I do believe that they received these hermit crabs because they had most likely purchased strawberry marine hermit crabs, and that's where the mix-up occurred from. And so, they have continued to thrive and to settle in here. We have had 16 remaining after those first couple of fatalities, and we've moved them into their permanent homes. What you can see here behind me is one of those homes. It's roughly about 150 gallons, and there are 11 strawberry crabs in here. And what we decided to do was we lumped the crabs based on size. So we have 11 of the larger crabs moved into this tank, and then in our purple pincher tank, which is just a bit smaller than this one, we moved the smaller crabs, the smaller strawberry crabs in with them since they were similar size. So now I think we're going to take a few questions. Since we have posted our journey online with our rescues, we've received a lot of questions, and it feels like we answered the same questions quite a bit, so we thought we'd share them here with you at CrabCon. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner Gianna here to ask the questions. Gianna?
Thank you, Mom. Will any of the crabs be available for adoption?
No. So when we first received them, I was a little overwhelmed. 20 unexpected crabs, especially very large crabs that require a lot of space and a lot of specialized care. The very first thing I thought of was the captive bred breeding program. Thinking to myself that these crabs are really close to being in the wild, having access to the right lighting, the right food, the ocean water, so I thought they'd be in peak breeding condition or close to. And so I reached out to Mary Akers, who in turn connected me with Darcy Madsen, who actually lives here in Texas as well, about 4 hours away. She had some male strawberry hermit crabs and was looking for some females to add to her collection. So she traveled out here, met with us, got to see our crabs, and we donated 2 females to Crab Central Station. So they are living their best life in a 700-gallon amazing crab habitat, and hopefully they will make babies someday that we can all benefit from. So short answer, no crabs are available.
Have you noticed anything funny or strange about their behavior?
So much. But the one story I have to tell, after they were here for the very first day, I decided I wanted to set up my cameras so that I could keep an eye on them. We use the Wise cams. You can actually see them here in the tank. I have 3 just on this tank. So I repositioned them all so that I could keep an eye on the crabs while they were in their smaller 10-gallon setups. And that first night, I was lying in bed and just watching on the Wise app, and I saw a naked crab. I had never had a naked crab or experienced one without a shell before, so I was a little bit starting to panic, but then I thought, okay, well, I've seen a lot of cases like this online. So I looked up, just looking for some suggestions of what to do on our Facebook group. And luckily I was still keeping an eye on the camera, and I zoomed in and noticed he was doing something. So watching him, I could see him using his legs in the saltwater pool as he was perched on the corner of the pool naked. And what it looked like, the best way I could describe it is like a human if they were washing their laundry, back and forth, up and down, around, and it was his shell. He was moving his shell, rolling it in the water, almost like washing it. And so after about a minute, he jumped into the pool, completely submerged, and within another minute, he emerged from the pool wearing his shell, acting like nothing had ever happened, walked right over to the food bowl. And so from that day on, we decided to nickname him Naked Guy. So he is our naked guy, although later on he earned the name Blaze because of his really striking deep strawberry color. So yeah, that was the funniest story I think that we've had so far.
Have any of the strawberries molted since you've had them?
Yeah, actually, they've all molted. I'm pretty sure all of them. They've at least all buried for weeks at a time. The first couple of weeks that they were here, they were very, very active. Nobody really dug down. What I noticed the most the first couple weeks to even the first month or so is that they were roof checking. And what I mean by roof checking is they were going to the lid and they were constantly trying to push up on the lid to escape. My initial thinking, it actually made me a little sad, thinking that they were looking for the ocean. They're trying to get out because they want to go home. And I was really sad. Like, we just took these crabs, they ended up coming out of the wild, and here they are in this tank, you know, albeit a great tank, and it's large, it's nowhere near what they would have in the wild. But I noticed that behavior starting to dwindle down, and they started to become more content and more relaxed in their tank. And so then they all started burrowing down to molt. But an interesting thing I noticed about their behavior is that they left up one crab. So they all went down pretty much simultaneously, but this one crab stayed up, almost like he was keeping watch over the group. And it was actually Seymour who, oh, he went back in. He was hanging out right here. And of course we started filming and he went away. But Seymour stayed up, and he seemed like he was keeping watch. He was alert and awake and out 24/7. And so after about a month, Captain Jack Sparrow, which is one of our other crabs, came up almost like to relieve him. And then about a week after that, I noticed that Seymour then went down to molt. So it just seemed really fascinating that they would keep one crab up at all times just to be on the lookout, to keep watch, and to make sure that everyone was safe. So they've now all taken turns coming up and going back down. I think I have about 5 up right now, but that can change on any given day. But they've all at least molted once that I'm aware of.
Back in February, Houston experienced record low temperatures and widespread power failures. Were you affected, and what did you do to keep the crabs warm?
Yeah, that was very, very interesting and tough time for us. You know, we don't normally have, you know, very cold temperatures here in Houston. It's very much 70 to 100 degrees year round here. So we did know about a day or two in advance that it was going to be record lows, and so we had a little bit of time to prepare. We were without power for about an entire week. It was pretty much 4 or 5 days, consistent, no power. And then once the power was restored, it was real intermittent. You might have heard the term rolling blackouts. So they'd have us, on power for about an hour or two, and then they'd cut our power again for about 8 hours, and then we'd get an hour or two of power, and so on and so forth. During that time, the temperatures in the house dropped to somewhere around 40, 45 degrees. We were able to keep our tanks warm by using some of the tips that we learned by watching a video posted by the Crab Central station about a day or two in advance of the storm. So what we did initially was wrap the tanks in a Mylar emergency blanket. These are just it's like a little packet that has a blanket in it, and you can buy it as part of a first aid kit or in like camping gear. And so we wrapped the tanks in that. And then we went around the house and we found every single blanket that we could find that we weren't going to use to keep ourselves warm, and we wrapped all of the tanks. In addition to the crabs, we also, like I mentioned, have frogs. We had an orchid mantis, and we have aquariums with pet fish at the time as well. And so we just wanted to keep all of them warm and comfortable. And so we also had some Reflectix left over from wrapping our pipes, which is like almost like an insulated bubble wrap, or similar to a sunshade that you would use in your car on your windshield. So we wrapped the tanks with that as well. That worked for probably about 24 hours or so, but by the second day, when the power was consistently out, we knew we were going to need to do something additional. And what I found was we had a bunch of containers that looked like deli containers. They were about 32-ounce containers. I used them to store homemade soup, so I knew they were waterproof. And I used our stove to boil water, poured that water into those containers, and then I put them in between the glass and the blankets and used some duct tape to hold them into place. So they worked almost like hot water bottles or a heat mat or heating pad to help keep the aquarium warm. And that seemed to work. I would refill those about every 2 hours so that the water stayed warm. During the time, most of the crabs stayed buried, which it added to my anxiety a little bit, not being able to see them and to know that they're okay. But I know that sand is a regulator, and that's part of how they stayed warm or helped to regulate their body temperature throughout the week. So I'm happy to report we had no fatalities other than a couple of our pet fish. And I think we have time for one more question.
So what about shells? These crabs are big, so how do you find the right shells for them?
Oh, that's a good question. So inheriting 20 crabs all at once, especially large, almost softball-sized crabs, was a real challenge. We weren't prepared, so we did not have a large variety of shells. Luckily, I had a few shells that I had received or ordered over time that were too big for our purple pinchers, which ended up being a good fit for the strawberries. So I did just went online and just bought from every vendor that I could find that was part of our online group's approved seller list. But that first day, which is really interesting, Seymour, who I mentioned earlier, he actually came with a hole in his shell, and it was a pretty sizable hole, not like a pen tip, but more like an actual eraser tip on a pencil. And so he changed almost immediately into a carved turbo shell. But the interesting or funny thing about it was all the other crabs that were in that tank with him at the time lined up next to him while he was evaluating his new shell. And I got a little concerned because I thought, well, maybe this is a sign of shell aggression. So I watched from a distance just to observe the behavior. And what he ended up doing was, he rolled it around, checked it out, and he moved into that shell. When he discarded his shell, the others took turns looking at his shell. So they looked at it, they rolled it around, one even tried it on actually. But by the time they were all done evaluating it, they discarded it because obviously it had a hole and it wasn't useful for them to store water and food inside their shell. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting thing to watch, to see them developing those family and pack dynamics. They're very social creatures, and that's one of the things that we've really learned through these last 6 months of having them, is that they really, really do communicate with each other. They get along for the most part. I've only seen one sign of aggression, and I don't even know that it really could be deemed aggression, but Blaze was at the top of a piece of chala wood, and Seymour was approaching, and he just took his feet and went like this and shoved Seymour, and Seymour rolled right back down the chala. It was funny to watch, and Seymour was fine, but they fight just like siblings. But it was super cute. But I think that's all the time that we have. I thank you for watching our video and for coming into our home and seeing our crab habitat and hearing our rescue story. We're honored and proud to have these guys in our lives. They bring us so much joy, and they brighten my day every day. This is my office. I work from here, so it's nice. I get to just look over and keep an eye on them throughout the day, and it brings me a lot of joy. So I hope watching this video has brought you a little bit of joy and made your day brighter today. Enjoy the rest of your crab con. Bye.